Hello everyone, my name is Chris Arsenault and today I'm here to demonstrate for you how to install Ansible using Cygwin on Windows Server 2019. Please note that all code shown in this tutorial is also available in my blog post, accessible via the link in the description below. I will add, if you would like to use Ansible in a production environment, I recommend that you deploy a dedicated Linux server for this application, as that's what it was designed to run on. First things first, to ease the amount of steps that we have to do, let's open up PowerShell and let's install Chocolatey. You can easily find this one-line script on Chocolatey's website for installing Chocolatey. Very easy to do so. After Chocolatey is installed, we're going to use Chocolatey to install some software for us. We're going to install Cygwin, which is a bash emulator for Windows. And then the other program, Cygit, is actually a tool used to automate package installations for Cygwin. And this will allow us to install all of the necessary requirements that we need for Ansible very easily. Now that Cygwin is installed, we are going to install some requirements. So first things first, SSH. This is the tool used by Ansible to communicate with the servers. And then we have Python and some other requirements that are required for Ansible to function properly. Now, while it's doing this, let's go ahead and pivot over here and open up our newly installed Cygwin terminal. First things we'll do is increase the font size, make it a little easier to see. Okay, now that these requirements are installed, next step is to actually kick off the Ansible installation. So let's do that now. First thing we're installing is Wheel. It's an application that speeds up the installation of Ansible. And then we're installing Ansible itself. Note that there is an alternate method for installing Ansible that's actually faster than this. However, the Ansible version you're going to get from that install method is version 2.8, and the version that we're going to get in the end is version 2.9. We want to leverage new capabilities in 2.9, and it doesn't take that much longer to install. So I feel it's definitely worth the effort, and for our purposes, required. Now, while that's doing this, we're going to pivot over on the PowerShell side, and we're going to kick off the OpenSSH server installation. Okay. Ansible can use WinRM for communicating with Windows servers. However, I find that it's much easier to simply use SSH. Ansible supports SSH. Ansible already uses SSH when managing Linux servers. So I think this is just making things that much simpler. Also, the WinRM setup and communication with Ansible isn't as straightforward as the SSH method. So we're doing a couple things. First thing here is we're installing the SSH server. Second thing we're doing is we're changing the default shell from being a command prompt to actually using PowerShell. And then we're actually setting the new SSH service to start up automatically, because by default it's disabled, and then we're starting that service. Okay, now that Ansible is installed, let's check to make sure the executable is working properly, as well as the output version. And that is what we expect, Ansible version 2.9.13, which as of today is the latest stable version. Now we are going to generate our SSH key. And feel free to accept the defaults here. This SSH key in the end is what's going to allow us access to this Windows server. Now that we've generated this, let's pivot over to PowerShell. Notice that we have a successfully installed OpenSSH server. First thing we're doing is we're copying that SSH key, the public key that we just created for that SSH key, to the appropriate directory within Windows. And then for that file that contains that SSH key in Windows, we're setting the required permissions against it. Finally, we're restarting the SSH server to make sure to put into place make sure it pulls in this configuration. Now that this is set up, we should have a fully working SSH server on Windows. To test this within our Cygwin client, let's try to SSH into it. SSH administrator and we'll want to do the server name. So this name right here, and we'll just copy and paste. If it works properly, we should not get asked for a password, and we should be immediately be admitted into Windows. So we'll say yes, because it's a new SSH key. And there we go. At that point, we are in a PowerShell session. So let's exit. Now, if we run this again, you'll notice that you are immediately entered because we already said yes and accepted that unknown key, so now it is known. Okay, with that point, we need to add a little bit more of the configuration for Ansible. We're missing some key stuff. So let's go into the bash session. We're creating the Ansible configuration directory. We're creating an Ansible config file. We're creating some group directories and whatnot. So now, if we go to Ansible, we see these files that we just created. With this configuration, we actually should be able to test connectivity from Ansible to this Windows server. So here's a test we can do. Ansible, the name of the host name, which is just a fancy way of just putting this right here, but programmatically. And then we are trying to ping the server. And there you have it, successful. At this point, you can run any Ansible playbooks that are designed for the Windows server against this server in question. You have a fully set up Ansible environment.